The Namibian Statistics Agency released economic data looking at the second quarter GDP and the August CPI, showing that the Namibian economy recorded a slow growth of 2.3% compared to an increase of 12.3% the previous year. I'm joined by Statistician General Dr. John Statler. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us today. As I mentioned earlier on in the intro, we saw a modest expansion. Do tell us which sectors in the economy did you see have been struggling a bit and which showed robust growth?
Thank you for the question. The growth was very slow in the second quarter, as you mentioned. And the sectors that contributed mainly to this slow performance was the hotels and restaurant sector. Also the construction sector didn't do well, and then mining and carrying sector. In fact, the hotels and restaurant sector contracted by about 31% in the second quarter of this year. The construction sector by about 17% and mining by 10.4%. Other sectors also struggled a bit, but there were also some sectors that did a bit better. Our agricultural sector performed quite well. There we have seen significant growth of close to 40%, but it's mainly due to the drought conditions that we witness in Namibia currently that are forcing farmers to sell off their livestock. The fishing sector also performed relatively well, and also the wholesale and retail trade sector. Manufacturing also posted a positive growth rate, but not very high.
Now, as you mentioned, the drought conditions did play a factor when it comes to how, what the GDP print came as. But now, given the state of the current global economy, what would be your forecast for the GDP print that we can expect at the end of this year?
It's difficult to give a forecast at this point in time. What I can say is that we expect growth to pick up in the second half of the year because there are some big projects in the pipeline that have been commissioned. There's significant work on a new uranium mine that will generate a lot of fixed capital formation and that will contribute to economic growth. We also expect some of the other sectors to do a bit better in the second half of the year, in particular the mining sector. But overall, it will really depend on what's happening to the global economy.
Now, the agency also came out with other information, and I'd like to move our attention through to the inflation rate. We've seen that increased. We're now sitting at 6% in August. This is from 5.8% in July. What were the driving forces behind the slight uptick in inflation?
There were three factors that contributed to the slight uptick. Number one is food prices that went up slightly by about 0.4 percentage points. Also housing went up slightly, and then transport prices. From the transport side, we were not surprised because we have seen oil prices have remained slightly elevated, and then with the exchange rate depreciation, we have expected that transport inflation would go up. But we've also seen maintenance work on transport, on motor vehicles have gone up slightly. We have also witnessed that the services sector, that there's also some bit of inflationary pressures coming from items in particular such as housing, but also other services sectors.
Now, John, given those underlying drivers, where do you see inflation sitting at in the next coming months?
I think we can expect inflation to remain more or less unchanged at about 6%, could be slightly up, but we don't see huge inflationary pressures. The key factor right now that's a bit of a concern is the exchange rate that has been weakened for some time now. So that could put upward pressure on imported goods. But overall, I would think that inflation will be still in the lower single digit.
Now, John, let's talk about those trade figures. Looking at the trade balance, it has narrowed. We're sitting at 0.2 billion Namibian dollars. What was interesting to note is that Botswana has become quite a big export market for Namibian diamonds.
Botswana has become the key export market for Namibia diamonds as of this year. And I think this is directly because of the decision by the BS to set up its key head offices in Botswana. And most of the diamond trade is happening through Botswana. So we have seen that switch has started to happen in this year.
Thank you so much for that insight, John. Well, guess we'll have to leave it there for